All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Lefton.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I'm so happy we could all be here today for this important announcement. And I'm so grateful to be joined here by so many wonderful colleagues, including Gary Ginsberg from the Department of Health and our wonderful team at the Department of Environmental Conservation, including our Division of Water Director, Carol Ann LaFay, our environmental engineer in our Division of Materials Management, Molly Tremblay, our Director of the Division of Environmental Remediation, Andrew Guglielmi. And I'm especially grateful for Governor Hochul for really guiding our actions today and prioritizing drinking water and natural resource protection to benefit all New Yorkers. And of course, excitingly, we know that the governor spearheaded and ensured that we had record-breaking funding in this year's budget for environmental protection through not only our Environmental Protection Fund, but also critically through the Clean Water Infrastructure Act, which is now up to $6 billion since 2017. And as part of that, actually excitingly, there is a new program to support testing of water supply to address PFAS, which is what we're here to talk about today. Broadly, our continued efforts to ensure that we have reliable and resilient water infrastructure, which is a top priority for Governor Hochul and for the Department of Environmental Conservation. Today, we're announcing a suite of significant new actions and helpful resources to protect, educate, and assist New York communities in addressing the ubiquitous threat of PFAS contamination. PFAS are a class of human-made chemicals that are widely used in various consumer, commercial, and industrial products since the 1940s. And 10 years ago, we didn't have the volumes of PFAS data and research that we do now. And in fact, it wasn't until PFAS contamination was confirmed in the drinking water of the village of Hoosick Falls that New York State and the nation really began the journey to better understand PFAS and its impact on our environment. The comprehensive and community-based response to Hoosick Falls launched New York's decade-long leadership in working with communities to clean up contamination, hold polluters accountable, set stringent policies and requirements to prevent public exposure, and make record investments in drinking water protection. It also launched a comprehensive examination into how widespread PFAS and other emerging contaminants have become. They're in water, in air, in soil, and they're present in countless consumer products and foods due to their use in making materials resistant to water, grease, and stains. Exposure is widespread because they are found in everyday items like non-stick cookware, food packaging, stain-resistant fabrics, firefighting foam, and many industrial processes. And PFAS does not readily break down naturally in the environment. It remains in the human body for a long time and has been linked to a range of health effects. Thanks to Governor Hochul, we've had record investments in protecting drinking water, cleaning up contamination, and efforts to prevent the introduction of PFAS into the environment are being implemented and successfully being launched statewide. Including earlier this spring, I joined DOH Commissioner McDonald and many other partners in celebrating the completion of the permanent water transmission line that connects Hoosick Falls to a new groundwater source with the village water treatment supply, a major milestone ensuring clean water for that community for decades to come. Governor Hochul, DEC, the Department of Health, and partners including the Attorney General, the state legislature, numerous environmental and health advocates, and academic institutions, among many others, have helped contribute to significant milestones over the last decade. These are wide-ranging accomplishments, including in 2020, New York was one of the first states to develop our own enforceable health-based drinking water standards for 2 PFAS compounds. In 2023, DEC finalized water quality guidance values for PFOA, PFAS, and 1,4-dioxane, along with guidance for industrial wastewater discharges to prevent exposure to emerging contaminants through the protection of drinking water sources. DEC classified PFOA and PFAS as hazardous substances, incorporating stringent cleanup standards for polluters to build into soil and groundwater remediation programs. We lead comprehensive emergency responses to contaminated drinking water supplies, including the installation of new treatment systems, site cleanups, and holding polluters accountable. And DEC developed guidance for sampling and analysis of restricted or banned PFAS in products and implemented policies to limit PFAS in biosolids recycling. DEC and DOH prevent direct exposure to the public by including sampling of contaminants in fish and wildlife and issuing advice for eating fish. These and many other highlights of New York State's response to PFAS are included in a new report that we're launching today called A Decade of Progress on PFAS, which is now available on our website. Cumulatively, they set a path forward for the initiatives and resources that we're announcing today. New York State is leading national efforts to understand PFAS, their effects on the environment, and the actions needed to ensure communities have access to clean drinking water and the tools to hold polluters accountable. And to date, we have sampled more than 5,000 private wells across New York as part of various investigations into potential contaminant sources and in response to community concerns. And it was DEC's groundbreaking investigations that helped trace drinking water contamination exceeding the state's stringent drinking water standards back to domestic wastewater. And our progress has only just begun. Under the leadership of Governor Hochul, with the resources announced today and more work underway, we are advancing science-based collaborative initiatives that keep New Yorkers informed and protected. As part of a comprehensive all-of-agency management strategy, today DEC is announcing new research, policies, and guidance as we continue to evolve our work to comprehensively assess and address PFAS sources in the environment, including a new rural background study detailing the widespread presence of PFAS on the landscape. We finalized wastewater treatment plant guidance that protects the long-term quality of water bodies. We have 2 new proposed policies directing DEC's actions in PFAS investigations and sampling of biosolid products, and a new webpage that provides a one-stop shop resources about these and other initiatives and information about DEC's multifaceted efforts to address PFAS. This package of resources will help DEC protect water supplies, will provide DEC with critically important data that will inform our next steps to prevent PFAS exposures and protect public health. We're really thrilled that in addition to, of course, the funding included for the Water Infrastructure Act, the Environmental Protection Fund, this year's state budget included reauthorizing our Superfund authority with another $1.25 billion investment in Superfund to ensure that DEC has the tools needed to hold polluters accountable and ensure successful remediation of areas all across the state. DEC's initiatives represent years of science-driven research and collaboration and direct work with communities most impacted by PFAS pollution. They help fill the bigger picture of contaminants that are no longer emerging, but they're here for the long haul. We will hear more from each of the incredibly talented teams who helped develop these measures. But first, I want to introduce Department of Health partner Gary Ginsberg, as well as I know he's here with Dan Lang, who are 2 really critically important partners of ours here at DEC, to speak more about the Department of Health's role in protecting New Yorkers from PFAS. Gary, over to you.
Hi, and thank you, Commissioner Lefton. I hope I'm audible. But if not, let me know. Thank you, Commissioner Lefton, for organizing this briefing and for the tremendous collaboration and partnership between our 2 agencies over the past 10 years in meeting head-on probably the most challenging chemical contamination issue of our time. Whether we talk about PFOA or PFOS or any of their perfluorinated cousins, and whether we talk about the plethora of health concerns, including cancer or impacts on cardiovascular health, the immune system, or early life development, the bottom line is that they are ubiquitous and highly persistent, and not just in the environment, but also in humans, persistent and pretty much prevalent in all of us. But once we take them up, it takes years to clear them from our bodies. So the best approach in DOH's mission is to prevent exposure, especially via drinking water, which has proven to be the dominant source of PFAS chemicals in many communities across New York State. In 2020, DOH promulgated drinking water MCLs, or maximum contaminant levels, for the two main drivers of exposure and risk, PFOA and PFOS, setting the incredibly low levels, restrictive, stringent levels of 10 parts per trillion. That's with a T. The implementation has been highly successful with the help of both federal and state funding. Thank you to Governor Hochul and the collaboration with both EFC, or the Environmental Facilities Corporation, and DEC, to get that funding out to communities to remove emerging contaminants from their water supplies. Approximately $570 million over the past 5 years to fund roughly 140 projects, including those targeted at PFAS chemicals, as well as 1,4-dioxane, another important emerging contaminant mentioned by Commissioner Lefton. Thus, millions of New Yorkers have already been protected from PFAS in their drinking water, far ahead of US EPA's timeline of 2029 for PFAS removal from drinking water. For homeowners who use their own private wells for drinking water, DOH has for years worked closely with DEC to test and provide alternative drinking water or treatment systems to reduce exposure to various harmful contaminants, including PFAS. Thanks to Governor Hochul's commitment in this year's state budget, we are working with DEC and the Environmental Facilities Corporation in designing a testing and mitigation rebate pilot program to take place in 2026 in the highest risk communities to help private well owners. In several communities affected by PFAS in drinking water, including Hoosick Falls, DOH has conducted blood biomonitoring to make sure that the treatment of the water supply was effective at removing the PFAS exposure and causing the slow but welcome evidence of its removal from people's bodies over time. Our health effects investigations, in conjunction with the CDC multi-site study, will be wrapping up in the next 2 years, at which time we will have a better understanding of the health impacts in New York communities affected by PFAS in drinking water. And DOH continues to work closely with our Drinking Water Quality Council to identify emerging contaminant issues that may need further action in New York State. While we are proud of these accomplishments, there is still much more work to be done, and DOH continues to look forward to working closely with DEC to meet these challenges. And now, Commissioner Lefton, I turn it back over to you, and we'll sit tight if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Gary. We appreciate the partnership, and I am so proud today that we are really launching a continued and evolving work from DEC that shows an all-of-agency response, as well as critically proactive measures. But I know that the partnership between DEC and DOH is representative of all our government, of the all-of-government approach we've had. So thank you for your partnership, Gary. Next, I'll introduce Carol Lamb-Lefay, the Director of the Division of Water, who will go through the technical guidance that we have finalized today. Carol.
Hi, thank you, and good morning, and thank you for joining us. So today we're announcing the finalization of the Division of Water's Technical and Operational Guidance Series, or TOGS 1314. This is a major step forward to protecting our waters and safeguarding drinking water from communities across the state. Emerging contaminants present complex and evolving challenges. Many of these chemicals were never designed to be removed at traditional wastewater treatment systems, and upgrading the treatment to address them is often not cost effective and in many cases technically impracticable. That's why TOGS 1314 establishes a clear science-based approach focused on tracking down sources of contamination and reducing these pollutants before they ever enter wastewater treatment plant collection systems. The guidance utilizes our pretreatment authority, prioritizing efforts to update speedies permits at these municipally owned wastewater treatment plants that discharge upstream of drinking water intakes. This strategy is going to ensure that we are directing our attention and resources where they provide the greatest public protection. Importantly, TOGS 1314 builds on our existing scientific foundation. Water quality guidance values in TOGS 1.1.1, which were issued back in 2023, provide the basis for DEC to set numeric targets at these treatment works that they can then use to establish local limits, ensuring their discharges remain protective of water quality. The guidance also includes a detailed example of a pollutant minimization program, giving the operators of these treatment works a practical tool that they can adopt or they can tailor to identify sources, working with their industrial users and reducing the contaminant loads at their source where it will be more cost effective. Through our environmental benefit permit strategy, we're further prioritizing permit actions for facilities with the greatest potential to affect water quality, ensuring a targeted and efficient implementation. We conducted extensive outreach prior to coming out with the draft guidance document and really solicited a lot of information from our stakeholders and received a lot of input during the public comment period. We heard a range of perspectives. Some stakeholders called for more rapid statewide action, while others raised concerns about implementation, the lab capacity, the cost, staffing, and alignment with federal guidance. Our final document reflects a balanced response, a phased adaptive approach that addresses source control while recognizing the challenges in implementation and the evolving science. Next slide. Today's announcement also aligns with the governor's strong and ongoing commitment to clean water. The governor's proposed $500 million in additional water infrastructure funding in this year's executive budget, bringing New York's clean water investment to $6 billion since 2017. Coupled with the historic funding through the Environmental Bond Act, these investments are giving municipalities the tools they need to upgrade essential infrastructure, reduce pollution, and protect public health. So New York has always been a nation leader in water protection, and finalizing TOGS 1314 just reaffirms that leadership and ensures that we are making meaningful, proactive steps rather than waiting for federal action to safeguard our drinking water and natural resources. By focusing on source control and providing practical tools like minimization plans, we are setting a clear path to reduce the risks and maintain clean water for generations to come. Our website also has been updated to include a portal that folks can go to see the data that we are collecting and what we are finding. So really wanting to be transparent in that effort as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. Appreciate that. And thank you for your leadership through the Division of Water and these really important new TOGs, which will help our wastewater treatment facilities really play a major role in ensuring that we are minimizing exposure to emerging contaminants and PFAS. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Molly Tremblay, who are from our Division of Materials Management, to talk about our draft policy requiring the sampling of PFAS and biosolids products.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. My name is Molly Tremblay. I work in the Organics Reduction and Recycling section in our Division of Materials Management here at DEC. Our group manages the recycling of everything organics, food scraps, yard wastes, and other organics such as biosolids. Today, we're announcing a new program policy addressing the potential impacts of PFAS chemicals in recycled biosolids products. Biosolids recycling offers a lot of real benefits, including supporting soil health and cutting greenhouse gas emissions by diverting this material from landfill disposal. Of course, these benefits depend on ensuring the biosolids products are reasonably managed and that they don't threaten water quality, agriculture, or environmental or human health. DEC's previously issued program policy DMM7, which requires facilities that accept biosolids for recycling to test each source for PFAS compounds, identifying biosolids that may present a greater risk due to the influence of industrial sources to the wastewater treatment plants. And then it goes one step further to require those sources to be addressed to reduce PFOA and PFAS levels. Building on that foundation of DMM7, we are now issuing a new interim policy, DMM7A. Under this policy, all permitted facilities that produce biosolids derived soil amendment products in New York State, and also any entities importing these products into New York State, must conduct PFAS sampling and analyses using approved updated sampling methods. Results will be submitted directly to DEC and made available to the public. This policy will go into effect 90 days after it's issued, and moving forward, facilities will continue to collect samples at a frequency tied to their production volume. This data is going to play a vital role in DEC's ongoing rulemaking process for Part 361, which is the regulations that govern biosolids recycling facilities. They will help us evaluate how proposed PFAS standards will impact New York State facilities and whether additional controls on specific compounds may be warranted. As part of this rulemaking, DEC will be hosting a stakeholder engagement session to gather more input from industry associations, wastewater facilities, biosolids recycling facilities, ag partners, environmental organizations, and members of the public. So stay tuned for that early in the new year. A great way to do that is by subscribing to DEC Delivers. So we have a solid waste and recycling newsletter that'll definitely be advertised there. The dialogue is critical to ensuring any proposed standards are protective, practical, and informed by real-world experience from the people who work with these materials every day. So in conclusion, DMM 7A reflects DEC's commitment to using the best available science, transparent data, and precautionary action as we work towards long-term protective standards for PFAS and biosolids. We look forward to continuing this work with our partners across the wastewater, recycling, and agriculture sectors as we move forward towards this new rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Grateful for your leadership and excellent work. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Andrea Guglielmi, who is our Director of the Division of Environmental Remediation, to talk about our rural background study as well as some new policies from remediation. Andy, to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lefton, and good morning, everybody. I wanted to spend some time talking about some science that DEC has undertaken with consultants and statisticians to look at what rural background soil levels of PFAS look like in the state of New York. So this is a study that was built off of studies we've done related to other contaminants in the environment, including contaminants like mercury, lead, and arsenic back decades ago, to try and get a sense of what the levels of both PFOA and PFOS in soil are currently, in order to inform how we might go about cleaning up sources, significant sources of PFAS to the environment. The results of this study, again, will be used to establish what we call soil cleanup objectives, and in various portions of the state, depended on the use of a site that we're cleaning up in New York. What we found is that PFAS are present in nearly every sample that we've taken during this soil study. PFOS specifically, PFOS was found in 97% of surface soil samples, and PFOA was found in about 76.5% of samples. Next slide, please. And as a result of what we found in the analysis that we did and our statisticians did, these are in parts per billion, these levels that you're seeing right here. Luckily, consistent with what's being found in other states around us. In Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, you can see that the levels of PFOA and PFOS in rural background are consistent or lower than what we're finding in other states. So that's beneficial to us because that we're not an outlier, although it also shows that these levels are present throughout the Northeast. Next slide, please. There's a lot going on in this slide, but this is really just to convey that there are a lot of different factors, both traditional hazardous waste sites that we identify and clean up and eliminate exposures to humans and the environment, but there's also various different inputs that run through the natural cycle and the environmental cycle, including issues like wastewater, leachate from landfills, septic systems, both private septic systems and commercial septic systems, runoff, stormwater runoff, and even rainwater has been shown. There's been scientific studies that have found PFAS in rainwater. So trying to address all of these in a unified way, all of our divisions throughout the department are trying to identify those specific sources and remove them from the environment when we can, remove them from commerce and retail products as well when we can. Next slide, please. So the commissioner mentioned a $1.25 billion reauthorization of the state Superfund program. That's a significant benefit to us in holding polluters accountable. There were some other improvements to the state Superfund law that allow us to, in the first instance, require those parties that are responsible for contaminating water, both public water systems and private water systems, to pay for the treatment and the cleanup of those water systems. We have had in place for a very long time a policy on how we investigate and then provide alternate water to folks related to contamination in their private drinking water. That is called DER 24. DER 24 we've now used to address, we talked about sampling about 5,000 private wells so far as part of our response to PFAS. We've installed thousands of these systems to protect drinking water, to really eliminate exposure, the most direct form of exposure to PFAS that we're worried about. This update to this policy is to recognize all those various sources that you saw on that slide prior, to try and make sure that we are pursuing polluters when we can, and then also understanding what those various sources might mean in terms of our response to providing alternate water. And this policy is out. It's published. It is available for public comment till February for about 60 days. So we look forward to hearing any comments that the public has on the policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that great overview. So as we know, we've got a number of next steps here, but as you can see, DEC is forging a cleaner path forward by prioritizing the removal and prevention of many of the forms of PFAS pollution to help create healthier ecosystems and communities. The wastewater treatment plan guidance, the rural background study finalization, the biosolids product sampling and private water supply policy proposals will help provide DEC with critically important data and help inform New York State's next steps to prevent PFAS exposure and protect public health. And of course, DOH's new program in partnership with the Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as the Environmental Facilities Corporation, to provide testing and alternate water supplies to homeowners in New York State. The new pilot program included in this year's budget is an important component of all of this. And as DEC and our partners continue to engage the public and examine ways to help limit the introduction of PFAS into the environment to ensure the protection of public health and natural resources. Next week, DEC and DOH will be participating in the latest Drinking Water Quality Council discussions that continue to help inform recommendations about contaminants in drinking water. And other next steps include reviewing the public comments received on the draft policies we discussed today that will help guide our next phase of initiatives. Looking ahead, we have great work underway to address other known PFAS sources. We are developing draft regulations to implement a new law limiting PFAS apparel. We have a robust engagement with the public, retailers, apparel suppliers, and other stakeholders, which continues, and proposed regulations are expected next year. We are implementing the current restrictions in the law through product testing to assess compliance now. We're also working closely with stakeholders to develop a regulation requiring the treatment of leachate from active municipal solid waste landfills and active construction and demolition debris landfills. This rulemaking will be available for public comment and is instrumental in reducing contamination prior to discharge, either to a wastewater treatment plant or directly to the environment. Many of the accomplishments and initiatives today were driven by the public and ensure that we maintain a working dialogue with communities. DEC's resources about PFAS can now be found on a new dedicated webpage to support ongoing education and engagement efforts. The dec.ny.gov/PFAS webpage offers additional resources on PFAS contamination and provides opportunities for the public to comment on the current and future policies and regulations being developed to address PFAS sources and its impacts. We encourage the public to visit the site and to stay informed by subscribing to newsletters and other notices through DEC Delivers, our email news services. As you see today, we are working across the agency through all of our regulatory responsibilities to ensure that we have a comprehensive plan and program to address emerging contaminants. And we're grateful to have the opportunity to talk about some of those great initiatives with you today. Now I'll turn it over to John, who will facilitate questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are, as I've noted in the chat, we are taking questions in the chat. I see we already have one in there. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat, and also please just note your station, media name, or outlet with your question, just for context here. This question is from Marie French. Looks like there's a couple different questions in this. How do these actions address recent federal delays or proposed rollbacks regarding standards for PFAS chemicals? Do we want to take this one at a time, Commissioner? What's easiest?
Let's do that, John, since there are several questions from Marie here. Thank you, Marie. And I think I'm going to delegate these out too, because I think the team will do a nice job. Maybe actually, Andy, if you want to start on the questions regarding the federal delays and proposed rollbacks on PFAS standards.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So DEC and DOH, the state already has in place enforceable standards for both PFOA and PFOS at 10 parts per trillion in drinking water. Those are the standards we look at when we are addressing contamination that's found in drinking water sources to eliminate those exposures. There is, a period of delay at some of the federal standards that have been implemented. So those aren't even effective yet. There's the grace period, I believe, till 2029 for some of the standards that have been established by the EPA. So New York states are already in place. They're already enforceable. They were challenged and they were held up successfully. So the state has been leading in this area, and establishment of those drinking water standards has also led to some of the other standards you've heard from us today, including the Department of Water's TOGS. We have guidance values for other waters that Department of Water has established. We have, like I mentioned during my talk, we will use a rural background study to then implement other soil standards. So it's a cascading effect, and we're really ahead in a lot of ways of the federal government in terms of looking at each piece of the environment and each of our resources and what standards we need to put into place for these hazardous PFAS substances that we've listed.
Thank you, Andy. And I think it's important to reflect, as always here, just the critical importance of New York continuing to move forward to ensure that we're protecting public health and the environment, irrespective of the actions of the federal government here. Carol, if you could please answer the question regarding the TOGS with respect to how this would be implemented in the SPEED's permit programs.
Sure. So as far as the comment, should I read it? Does everybody have access to the comment?
I'll read it out. On the wastewater treatment, there's been some criticism from advocates that EC isn't requiring SPEED's holders to in places that might impact fishing waters. Does this change that? Is this more information gathering than setting strict limits on discharge levels for PFAS?
Okay, so the answer is yes to all of it. So the TOGS is really our prioritization and strategy, and we are using our traditional procedures. And some of the processes that we have in place are utilizing action levels in place of strict limits. So on fishing waters, our goal is really to collect information to understand what the baseline discharges would be, what is controllable, what isn't. So our plan is to utilize action levels to be able to set numeric values, whereas the publicly owned treatment works can use that to set local limits and as a target to make sure that their discharges remain protective of the guidance values that have been established to protect the waters. We're also collecting information on the 40 other PFAS compounds so that as things emerge, we will have to continue to adapt and be flexible as we understand the situation more. We will, continue to flex as is allowed in our current processes. But the bottom line is to make sure that we have the tools to understand what is being discharged, what can be controlled, and then implementing those practices to make sure that the discharges are protective of drinking water.
And so, Carol, if I may here, so DEC already has discharge standards now, and what this would essentially do is for, particularly if there's an industrial user, right? If a wastewater treatment facility is taking in waste from an industrial user, this essentially has testing requirements to understand at what levels PFAS might be present in what that wastewater treatment facility is taking in, to allow them for some controls to ensure that the wastewater treatment facility can meet those discharge levels as required. So really important tools to really enable these treatment facilities to reach those standards, and then also understand where in the waste stream the prevalence of these compounds are coming from, so that we can have that further data upstream. So this really ensures the effective implementation on discharge standards. Is that fair to say, Carol?
Yes, absolutely. And we'll continue to work with our partners at New York Water Environment and Rural Waters to share information as it is collected for that purpose, so that we're efficient in tracking down those sources and getting them out of the waste stream altogether.
Thank you, Carol. Finally, on biosolids, does DEC have an estimate of how much testing would be required, i.e. how many or the quantity of products that would be subject to testing or the potential cost? Molly.
Yeah, and I see I've got a little bit of a doubler in there for the next one too. There's currently around 30 permitted biosolids recycling facilities across the state creating Class A products. There's also land application, but ones creating products, there's about 30. Along with a handful of Class A soil amendments coming in from facilities permitted in neighboring states. I think it's about 10 right now. DMM 7A specifies the number of samples that each facility will need to do based on the amount of material that they produce. So larger facilities will be required to do more sampling. I won't go into specific details, but you can see that frequency table outlined in the policy, which is posted to our website now.
Right. I think, Molly, did you address the first question, Natalie's first question there? I'm just trying to make sure that we're not missing questions here.
Yep. Oh, sorry, I'll continue on. So the question is how much out of state biosolids is coming into the state? Where is it being spread? What is the new state criteria testing? And what happens if it doesn't meet new criteria? So like I said, currently there's about 10 different distributors of Class A biosolids in New York State. It's not a large quantity, but it is spread in various places. They are not regulated to a particular location. When they come in as Class A, they are a finished product, allowed to do what they want. This policy will have them testing for those PFAS compounds. If they do not meet those, they will no longer be able to distribute them in New York State. And we would look at these individually.
All right. Natalie Bruza's next question from WSKG is 5,000 private wells have been tested. Is this testing ongoing, and will the state be testing all private wells? How many private wells are there in the state?
DEC and our partners at the Department of Health have tested over 5,000 wells really in our last decade of efforts to ensure that we are not only, of course, responding to community concerns with respect to emerging contaminants, but also to, as we continue to clean up these sites across the state. I will turn it, I think, to Gary perhaps to talk about DOH's perspective, just really on the lead of drinking water. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Commissioner and John, you were breaking up a little bit on my end. Could you just repeat the question?
5,000 private wells have been tested. Is this testing ongoing, and will the state be testing all private wells? How many private wells are there in the state?
Gotcha. Oh, sorry, it is in the chat, right? Yeah, there's a large number, roughly 1 million private wells in New York State overall, but our private well testing approach in the new program that we're rolling out in the beginning of 2026 with DEC and the Environmental Facilities Corporation is going to be very piloted and strategic at the parts of the state where the 5,000 wells that have already been tested and through various other kinds of investigations, we know are potentially most vulnerable to PFAS groundwater contamination. So the dollars will be best spent And as we, roll this out, we'll learn a lot as we go, working closely with counties and, making sure that private well owners have the opportunity to participate in the targeted areas.
And I'll say, of course, that new pilot program included in this year's budget was included in Governor Hochul's executive budget, and appreciate her leadership. Thank you, Gary. I'll take on the next question we have here in the chat about the apparel legislation that was mentioned, if it's still being drafted, and what exactly would that look like, and how would it help protect New Yorkers? I think the big message really that's important here today is that our understanding of PFAS continues to evolve. And what we're seeing is that PFAS compounds are prevalent in our environment across the state, and the sources of those are not just from one responsible party and point source, but it's truly ubiquitous. And the way that it is entering into our environment is because, as we know, it's used in consumer products. And this has been happening since the 1940s. And it's in lots of different things like our nonstick pots and pans. And it's also in apparel. And so what we know is that one of the most effective things that we can do is prevention. And our strategies are focused on prevention. And we have been considering different ways to reduce the presence of long-lasting chemicals in the environment. And one of those approaches is really preventing PFAS from being put into consumer products in the first place. So New York has established a new law restricting PFAS in apparel and outdoor apparel for several wet conditions. And those restrictions will be phased in the next several years. So first, effective January 1st of 2025, this year, the restriction of PFAS in apparel applies specifically to apparel with intentionally added PFAS. So that's meant to sort of be an ongoing basis. After January 1st of 2028, there will be a new restriction that will go into effect that applies specifically to outdoor apparel for severe wet conditions with intentionally added PFAS. So as you can see, these restrictions sort of are phased in over time. And importantly, DEC is working on the implementing regulations for these apparel restrictions that the legislature passed a couple of years ago. And I will say this really builds on other efforts, including having now also banned PFAS from firefighting foam, which was another common way that PFAS was being exposed in the environment. Team, any additions you'd like to add there?
Yep, I can hop in on that one real quick. So yeah, just to answer the question of whether the regulations are still being drafted. So yes, we expect those regulations to be proposed in 2026. And what exactly would that look like, and how will it protect New Yorkers? So we're considering a couple different options here. We're considering setting levels on restricting targeted PFAS that we know that we can test for. So there will be those targeted limits in addition to a limit that covers all of the other sort of non-targeted PFAS that can be tested through a method known as total organic fluorine testing. So that's kind of the framework that we laid out in a previous stakeholder meeting, which we recorded and is available on our website if you check out our PFAS in apparel law webpage.
Thank you, Connor. Andy, can you break down how certain regions, cities compare throughout the state? Are they better or worse than others?
Yeah, with respect to the rural background study is what I'm assuming this question is referencing, right? So one of the reasons we selected rural areas was to make sure we weren't biasing high any urban impacts. And in this study that we did recently on PFAS, we modeled and we followed the same design that we did of some of our other studies, right? That looked at other contaminants. I mentioned lead, arsenic, and other contaminants that unfortunately are sometimes ubiquitous in our environment. What we found was that it's really uniform, that 1.5 and 3 that we found, again, comparing them to other states. We even have some data at some of our remediation sites, for instance, in New York City, that showed very similar levels to those sites and cities as well. So there was no particular region or city or urban area that stuck out as an outlier. It really fell in line with some of those numbers I showed you on that table.
Thank you, Andy. Molly, you mentioned Class A biosolids. What about Class B biosolids? Are they included or have different regulations?
Yeah, good question. And I think this highlights a lot of, ideas that education is a big deal with a lot of these things, right? Just understanding the differences between the facilities and such. This particular DMM7A will cover these Class A biosolids, so the products themselves, the composts, the heat-dried pellets, those things. That's what's going to be targeted in this one. DMM7 targeted the sources of biosolids, and that includes all the ones going to those Class B land application sites. Those are also permitted within our program. They have a lot of very stringent criteria specific to each field that they're applied on. I won't get into too many details, but good call. Yes, Class A products are what we're targeting in DMM7A, whereas DMM7 focused on the sources to all of those.
Thank you, Molly, including those Class B. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I don't see any others in the chat.
We don't have any other questions. Feel free to follow up via email. If not, we are going to wrap up. I will drop the link to our new PFAS website in the chat for reporters to be able to take a look at. Again, feel free to send an email with any follow-up questions, pressoffice@dec.ny.gov. We are recording this, and we will have a copy available after we conclude. So if there are no more questions, we will wrap up. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, one more. The last question is, are there any legislative actions you'll be pushing regarding PFAS?
I think we'll continue to focus on implementing what the governor and the legislature move forward and work with them as they look at those different policies. We can't comment on legislation as a state agency, but we look forward to continuing to work with the legislature and the executive to ensure that we are preventing the introduction of these compounds into our environment.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Again, we'll have an audio recording of this after we conclude. Have a great day.
Thank you.